Oh, hi, Internet. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Game Life. On today's episode, we're going to talk to two of the men without whom the video game industry might not exist today. Ralph Baer, the inventor of the first home video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey, and Alcorn, the designer of Pong, the game that ignited the arcade industry. And then later, everybody's favorite Wired magazine senior editor, Chris Kohler, is going to be back, and we're going to talk about God of War, Chains of Olympus for the PSP, as soon as his battery finishes charging. Am I right?
Well, I'm Ralph Baer. I'm the guy who committed the original sin of creating the first video game. Parents keep coming to me and accusing me of creating those horrible games. Of course, when I explained to them that, well, I didn't really do the games, but I came up with a concept of video games and then built original machines, their eyes glazed over because concepts are not something that anybody understands. When I worked for L'Oreal and building a television set, we used test equipment that put patterns on the screen and in order to be able to adjust the television set for linearity, for height, for width, that sort of thing. And that gave me the idea of doing something with the set. Here was a test equipment that allowed you to do something on a screen. And that's where the idea germinated, but I didn't really act on it until a good, from early 50s to mid-60s, 15 years later. We demonstrated to RCA, Motorola, Sylvania, 3 or 4 others, Magnavox, and they all said, that's great stuff, but nobody moved off a dime. And one of the VPs at RCA left, became a VP for marketing at Magnavox in their New York office, sales office, and he was so impressed by what he saw, he said it's a go, just like that, one guy with vision.
Pong was an exercise in getting used to doing video games because they just got only one other video game before. So it was the simplest game no one could think of, but he motivated me to try to do a really good job at it, not just goof off. Mm-hmm. So he lied to me and told me that he had a contract from General Electric for a home consumer game. And I go, oh, that's really going to be tough. And the fact that nobody from GE ever called or came by or phoned or wrote us a letter didn't occur to me. This was not true. And once I had it done and I added things to make it play better, I was kind of depressed because it was too expensive for a home game, but it played pretty good. So we put it in the box and put it on location and worked. The first location for Pong was at Andy Cap's Tavern. So I came down to check it out and I discovered that the cash box was so full of quarters, they just overflowed when I opened it up. So I filled my pockets full of quarters, gave him my business card and said, gee, the next time that happens, just give me a call, I can do this. And so I had a couple $100 worth of quarters in my pocket, made it in a week.
If you had to go back, if you had all that technology, the same amount of technology at your disposal when you first made it, but could make any change to the original design, would you?
No, I'm too lazy. Once I get out the door, it's done, fine, I don't want to see it again.
And we're back, and as you can see, I've got Wired Magazine's Chris Kohler here with me, and we are going to talk about God of War, Chains of Olympus for the PSP.
Chains of Olympus is one of the best looking PSP games to date, and it really captures the look and feel of its console brethren. The ancient Greek monsters and the columns and the ruins, everything about it looks great.
Yeah, seriously, I wouldn't want to live in ancient Greece because you'd just getting attacked by minotaurs just on a constant basis. And God of War PSP does bring that same feel. Certainly what they've absolutely nailed are the controls.
That's always been an issue with the PSP because it's got one less stick to move, but you almost never think about the controls as you're playing, as you're tearing heads off and ripping people in half and blood is flying. You completely forget that you're playing a handheld game. It feels just like the old PlayStation 2 God of Wars.
There is definitely a bit of a learning curve because you don't have the right analog stick anymore, which you used to dodge, and so you used to just be able to sort of hit that and dodge out of the way of enemy attacks. You can't do that anymore because there is no right analog stick on the PSP, so what you have to do is hold down the L and R shoulder buttons and then hit the left analog stick. And again, eventually it clicks, but it does take a little bit of getting used to.
From moment to moment, though, it really looks terrific. The animations are spot on. Some of the effects with smoke and blood flying just look beautiful.
There's no filler in this game. You move directly, you know, from story beat to action to story beat. You know, nothing ever drags you down. There's no backtracking. There's no staying in a level for too long. It really just addicts you and keeps you moving. And that actually kind of works against God of War PSP. And the console games were 9 to 10 hours long. God of War for PSP, you can pretty much rip through it in about 5 to 6 hours.
Yeah, it's a terrific 5 or 6 hours, except at the end, it starts getting a little bit repetitive, but it's definitely, you know, I would prefer a shorter game where there's less monotonous fetch quests and repeating stuff.
It's still a great game. You just might want to rent it instead of buying it. God of War Chains of Olympus is getting pretty high ratings all over the place, and I think honestly it's getting a little bit overrated.
Yes, it's sort of like when Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories came out for PSP. There's an initial euphoria that they managed to squeeze all of this great stuff that was in the console game into the handheld version. But once the euphoria wears off, you're left with what's still a great game, but it's not quite up to the earlier entries in the series.
Right, and again, I think what's really important is to say that it's still a great game. It's probably one of the best games on the PSP, maybe the best action-adventure game on the PSP. But, you know, it's only 5-6 hours long. It's a lot less scope than the console Big Brothers. And for that reason, I'm going to stick with the rating of an 8 out of 10.
That sounds fair.